up folks, Commander Sol here, and welcome to the first of my game reviews for the Sol Reviews Games series, and we will be talking about Stellaris today, if you hadn't guessed from the thumbnail or the title. There are four aspects to which I will be grading this game. Firstly, we have the graphics, that is to say how pretty the game looks, the quality of the graphics, the quality of the UI, and how usable the UI is. Then we'll move on to narrative, which is how well the story is told in the game, which can be difficult for games like Stellaris because they focus more on emergent narrative rather than embedded narrative. So emergent narrative is where the player drives the story, the player creates the story, but embedded narrative is where the story is a set thing that the player interacts with. So that will be something we can talk about a little bit later on in the video. The third is efficacy. How well does the game do what it set out to do? And finally, enjoyability, which is my own little time to talk about how much I enjoy the game. That will be the grading system for every single Sol Reviews Games video that I do. This is just the first, so I thought I'd explain it to you a little bit there. And without any further ado, let's get straight into this and discuss the graphics. Stellaris is a beautiful game. This is the view you'll spend most of your time in. In the system view, you have the lighting is beautiful. The shadows are beautiful. You can see here, the faces that are closer to the star are lit up, the ones away are not. Not too many 4X games would focus on that too much. The quality of the assets is beautiful. You can see the lights from the cities on our capital world of Unity here. And it's just a beautiful game. The galaxy map likewise, it's clear, it's concise. You know where you can travel based on the hyperlanes. Your sensor range expands your view of the galaxy. And as you get further out and get better technologies, you can see more. It's really good. The UI is simple, it's intuitive, it's easy to use. You can choose all of these things. Yes, there's a lot of menus. That is something that detracts from it a little bit. It's not the most efficient method of doing UI, but it is usable. It's very intuitive. These pop-out menus mean that you have more space visible all the time. You can hide that for even more. It's really good. I like the UI design for this game. You've got the pop-ups at the top. The majority of the screen is available to see the game as a whole, and you can open up these windows to focus on what you need to focus on. Overall, I would rate the UI as a 7 out of 10. It's a beautiful game, but there's some stuff that could be improved and is improved by mods. For example, for the realism factor, or just to make the universe look better, you can use Real Space or Beautiful Universe. There are a plethora of shipset mods because I don't really like the designs of some of the shipsets. I don't like the humanoid designs, for instance. The newer ones they've done, the Imperial, the Aquatic, the cybernetic and the synthetic ones all look amazing. It's just the older ones could do with an update, in my opinion. But yeah, that's graphics. 7 out of 10 for graphics. That's a pretty good rating. We move on now to the narrative, and this is where it gets complicated because in Stellaris the narrative is emergent. It's not a set story. There are set events. For instance, when you start the game, you always have one star system. You always get a precursor event chain in the early game that you can complete for rewards. You always then enter the middle game where you face mid-game crises like the Great Khan, the L-Gates, and the Cosmic Storms, assuming you have the requisite DLC, which is another problem with this. A lot of the elements of narrative are locked behind additional paywalls. But then that's really a problem with Paradox games as a whole, rather than Stellaris. Then you enter the late game, where you have your final crisis, the Praetorian Scourge, the Contingency, etc., etc. And that is a prime example of why this game is not as good on narrative as it could be. What it does have, the emergent narrative is really well done, because the AI feel realistic. They aren't the best at actually playing the game, but interacting with them is very good. And I think that warrants a 4 out of 10 for narrative. Emergent narrative games will always score lower on this front than embedded narrative games like Baldur's Gate, where the story is something you can easily assess. The quality of the story is something you can easily assess. And yeah, this is something that I learned as part of my game design course at university. Emergent narrative is a lot harder to do well than embedded narrative. Embedded narrative is easy to do well, but it's harder to do in general. Like, when you do an embedded narrative game, you have to write the story. The story has to be compelling. It has to drive the player onwards. When you make an emergent narrative, you don't have to worry about that so much, but it can also feel lazy sometimes when you don't do enough to create that emergent narrative. If you don't have it being driven forward by the actions of the player, then it's not as easy to master. Stellaris does a good job, not a fantastic job, but it's a very good game. So we move on to efficacy. How well does Stellaris achieve its goals? And for this, I would say it's almost perfect. It is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a 4X game where you explore space, where you fight aliens or ally with aliens, and you defend the galaxy from an unstoppable evil. Or, if you have the Nemesis DLC, become the unstoppable evil. It's fantastic. 9 out of 10 on efficacy. It does exactly what it sets out to do. There is barely anything I would comment on that it could do better for this purpose. And enjoyability. Now, I'm going to start this section by saying I have over 600 hours playing Stellaris. A lot of that was with the early days. I started playing the game when it had only been out for a year, back when hyperdrives were just one of 3 methods of travel. You could use wormholes or warp drives. They have sadly changed that. I understand why. It was a massive drain on systems, and it's definitely for the better change, but I still like to play with the old ones when I could. Those hours have shown me that this game is fantastic. I have come back to it again and again and again, sometimes months after some I played last, and it never gets boring. It is a brilliant game. Granted, I do usually play the same sort of empire, a theocratic empire that sets out to rule the galaxy, but I have also played with the other styles. Hive minds are really fun. It's a great game. 8 out of 10 on enjoyability for me, and that brings us to the end of this video. I hope this review has proven somewhat useful for you, and I would highly recommend picking up Stellaris in a Steam sale if you don't already have it. I have been Commander Soul, over and out.